Ciao, and welcome back to my identity series. Today I have a very special guest who is a friend of mine since 20 years or so. And we used to work together, and then she picked up and went on a on a long journey. And she has multiple origins, and her children even more. And they grew up in 3 different countries. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing her. Welcome to my channel, Anna. Welcome, Anna. I'm
Thank you.
very, very glad to have you in this interview today. And I think the very best way to introduce you is if you would do it by yourself and just explain who you are. We met at work almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so long time ago. But since then, you traveled the world and you set up an own business and you set up a family and you did so many things. So I guess if you could give us a short summary of your own history and then what happened in your adult life in this context of identity, I guess that's the best way.
Okay, let's see. Most people would identify over by a passport or a country. That is impossible for me to do. I do only have one passport, and it's a blue one. I'm a United States citizen. But I don't consider myself truly American. I grew up in Germany. I don't really consider myself German either. I spent 6 years in Switzerland. Um, I spent 6 years in South Africa and 4 years in China, and we are now back in Germany. And I very much consider myself a global citizen. I don't. I couldn't pick one country if I had to. So to me, identity is very, very multifaceted. And I think many people, if they think about identity, and we'll get into this a little more, will realize that they might start with a country, but they are actually very multifaceted as well. Whether they have an international background or not, people are much more than just a country. So that give you a little overview of me. I've USA to Germany to Switzerland to South Africa and then eventually China and now back in Germany. So that's the quick version. For the last 2 years, I have been working as an independent trainer and coach for families that move abroad because that's what I know. We've got 3 kids of our own that were born in various locations around the world and
Where
are
were they
now
born?
settled. Uh, South Africa, Germany, South Africa. So
Okay.
we were in South Africa twice. So,
Okay.
and then they have memories of different places depending on the ages. So
Mhm.
our youngest doesn't really remember South Africa. She remembers China a bit. The oldest remembers South Africa quite well. China was a lasting impression, and they've all been in Germany now for 4 years. But when we got here, they had no idea how to function in Germany. They didn't know how anything worked.
Mhm.
They would argue over the chip to put in the shopping cart, and they would argue about who gets to put the bottles in the recycling because that was a really new, exciting thing that was
And did they
readjusting.
speak German when you went to Germany?
They spoke German. We always kept them bilingual.
Mhm.
But what was funny and that we didn't really realize until recently, we started looking at old videos of the children, is depending on where we were, they had very different accents. So if I look at my oldest, who was in kindergarten in Germany, when I watch her speaking English as a small child, she has a German accent. And then I look at my son speaking English in South Africa when he was in kindergarten, he has a South African accent. And then they were in China at a British school, so they picked up some British accent. And so it's all over the place, but they have always been bilingual and we intend to keep it that way, although it's not always easy and they definitely have different levels of language competence.
Different level means what?
Well, some like the older two are really confident in English, and German is more their second language. I mean, they speak it fluently, but the heart language would be English. Whereas our youngest, who went to school here, started school here, she was 6 when we arrived. Her heart language is German,
Mhm.
which I find a little bit hurtful, sad because I've only ever spoken English to her. So it's like Yeah. So the term mother tongue and mother language is I don't believe is a really a well-chosen term, because it has a lot more to do than just the parents. I think it really does have a lot to do with the environment that you guys as well.
Also, yes, sure. So you call it the heart language, which is a
Mhm.
nice term. I love it. And your husband is 100% German
Oh
by
no, that
no.
would be boring. Sorry, no offense.
No, no.
That was a bit arrogant. No, my husband is also multicultural. His mother is British, his dad's German. So he grew up with that sort of home environment too, of parents that were trying to figure out how to blend two cultures,
Mhm.
as well. And so his English is very good. And interesting though, his is better than his younger brother's. So again, you have a difference there. And I think that I can tell the British influence in him as well, and certain communication patterns and humor and stuff. So it does, I
Okay.
think we pass on cultures unknowingly too.
Yeah, sure. Sure. And it's more than just the language or the accent, of course.
Yeah,
How do your children feel? Do they speak Chinese? Do you speak
just a
Chinese?
little bit,
Just
just a little bit, very little. Yeah.
okay.
They started to bring out really good on the fly translation apps while we were in China. So we all stopped learning Chinese. We took the easy way out, which is, yeah, it's a very complex language.
Yeah, I heard
Everything
about
is so different.
it.
But they can't answer the question, who are you or where are you from,
Mhm.
with a country or a culture either. We have help them with that, because often you travel and you meet people, you're like, oh, where are you from? And it's really difficult to answer that question if you've lived in a few different places. Even if you've lived in Hamburg and Berlin and Munich, it's hard to answer that question. And yet we still do it because we like things neat and orderly,
Mhm.
right? To make sense of people. So our children were taught to answer the question like, oh, well, I currently live in Beijing, but my grandparents are in Germany, for example,
Okay.
which gives some information. And if anyone's interested, then they can ask further.
Mhm.
But it's not like telling your whole life story right away, because not everybody wants to hear that.
Yeah, that was what I said in the interview with my daughter, or even before. So sometimes you would like to answer, how much time do you have
Yeah,
for,
yeah.
it would take me an hour to answer.
But people don't always want that, and it can come across as arrogant, or and when it's you're not being arrogant, you just want to share your story,
Yeah. And
which
you
is
asked
can
for
be a
it,
real
so
conflict. Yeah.
yeah.
So, oh, where you from is often meant as an intro to getting to know you. And the people just want to say, oh, I'm from Germany.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes that's okay. That's all you want to say. But
Mhm.
when you have a bouquet of things to answer, you can choose what you answer. Right? You can keep the simple answer, or you can give a little bit more. But generally, with children, we suggest answering truthfully in sort of a way like I just suggested. And then if there's somebody asks more, oh, that's interesting, what that, then they can go into further.
Mhm.
But that way you find the balance between not lying, still being true to yourself, but not making it too complicated for the other person.
Mhm. Sure. So the question of identity was a topic for you and your family, just to talk about it and to be aware of it, and to also talk to them on how to answer, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, how they should feel or should not feel.
No, we let them decide that. And the answer changes depending on where they're at. I mean, generations back, part of my family is from Scotland, and my sister lived there for a long time. So there was a time where one of our children would answer, I'm Scottish, if asked, where are you from?
Mhm.
And they've never set foot in Scotland. But they're very much aware of all the different pieces of their personal puzzle, or tapestry, really, because it's woven together. So the metaphor of a tapestry is nice, because things
Mhm.
sort of blend and weave, and maybe one part comes out more than the other part comes out. Maybe I choose to show one of the other parts.
Mhm.
Um, and growing up as Americans in Germany, we stuck out. There was no question where we were from. People would easily put us in little boxes, and that's changed a bit through media, and the world is getting a little bit closer to each other. You can't always pick out, or guess where people are from anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think in the 80s, it was a lot easier, based on clothing, based on body language, based on how we walk down the street. It was a lot easier to pick out, say, an American than it is today.
Okay.
Because clothing, if you just think of teenagers, clothing is very similar across the board in, for example, now Germany and the States, than more than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little harder to just box people up, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. And do you feel your children, depending on the influence that the countries they grew up in have feel more or less a certain influence? Or is it just individuals of your family that have the family traits and lived in several different countries, but you can't say this is a Southern African influence, that is a Chinese influence?
I think right now they're very much influenced by Germany,
Mhm.
because we've been here for a few years now, and they're still at ages with 15, 13, and 9, where they're very much still learning who they are and how they act. So the German influence is strong. In our oldest, who still remembers South Africa most, there's definitely an influence of wanting to run barefoot and just sort of be more open about things. Whereas in China, it wasn't so much the Chinese influence, as the environment was Chinese and shops and restaurants and everything, but they were at a British school that had about 50 different nationalities represented.
Wow.
So, but the umbrella was the British system,
Mm-hmm.
and wearing school uniforms and certain way of keeping your hair tied back, and the neatness and the correctness of that, and how school was structured and how your books were structured and your day was structured. And I think that has left an impact on the oldest two as well, because
Mm-hmm.
that was truly their first experiences at school. So that's influenced them that way. And I don't know if we can say it's British influence or international school influence, but it definitely left its mark. But here now, in the beginning, they didn't know how to act in Germany, besides fighting over the recycling. It was like factors such as, like, we moved here and then we said we're unpacking. I said, go off and play. There are playgrounds everywhere, go. And they were gone for less than 5 minutes, and they all came back, and then they said, we're done. It's like, no, this is Germany. You're safe, and you're a child, and you're expected to be independent and just go off and do your thing. And it took them probably a year to figure out that that's okay, and that it's safe, and that they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And now, 3.5 years in, I'm lucky if they tell me that they've gone. I go looking and nobody's here. They've all just taken off. So they've adapted to the situation here, and they feel very, very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But it took some time.
And how about their friendships? Do they have friends which are also of multiple origins, or?
Yes and no. So our oldest, her friends are pretty monocultural. On average, just thinking of all the lovely children that come through our house. And our son definitely gravitates towards children that have a multicultural background.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that he sort of connects with is bilingual, of multiple heritage, expat kids, or just first or second generation. He has a wide array of cultures, really, that influence his friends.
Mm-hmm.
And our youngest is kind of a mix. She's got a bit of both.
I realized with my daughter when we
Mm-hmm.
came here to Switzerland, and that was just a year before she then went to kindergarten, and I don't know why, but wherever we went, she always picked the multicultural kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, there must be a vibe or something. I don't know.
I think they understand each other, even if the cultures, the actual cultures are different.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an understanding of a shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
The cross-cultural kid experience of switching between, knowing that you can switch, maybe speaking multiple languages and being able to code switch, really, to say, I can be more Italian at home and I can be more Swiss at school and I can be this and that. And just the ability to do that without actually talking about it, but just sort of understanding this person gets me. We share that. We share that experience of maybe completely different values at home too, versus when I step out the door. So you might have children of Turkish heritage that are Turkish and Muslim that have very different sort of family environment, especially if they're first generation, compared to what's going on outside their door.
Mm-hmm.
And they handle that very, very well. And it's an amazing skill that we don't really acknowledge. Also, as employers, it's a skill that we should be looking for, because it means that people are often able to adjust and adapt to different teams and to different work situations if they've grown up adapting and switching like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
it's an undervalued skill.
and it leads to more openness toward, differences, diversity, which is the keyword nowadays. But
It
that's
is.
true. So you don't have to explain all that stuff, but you are just from another country or from another ethnicity. So what?
Yeah.
So you
And you
look
can
more at the
accept
person.
the ambiguity of there being 2 or 3 different ways to do something,
Mhm.
and it's okay. So it's not a big deal that you solve your problem this way, I solve my problem this way. Something as simple as eating a warm breakfast is something that's just what we do at home, and my friends always eat a cold breakfast,
Mhm.
right? So there's no one way of doing things, and if you grow up with that kind of awareness that there are different things going on and it's all still feeds you, right? Then you translate that into all different aspects of your life.
Mhm.
And I truly believe that cross-cultural children and adults have the potential to bring world peace, if you will, or something. I really think there's a lot there that's still, it's an untapped resource.
Mhm. What I often say is in relation to the color of the skin, I wait for the day where we all mix up that far that we all have the skin of the color of cappuccino. So
Yeah.
everything is mixed up, And
Yeah.
once that is done, there's no reason to hate, to fight, to discuss, to feel upper, lower, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We are the same, and we finally will have this humanity. So
What
it's,
happens to the redheads, though?
I don't know. I guess the world needs also the mutants.
No, I think that an acknowledgement of our shared humanity, but yet the individual differences. I think that that's what we need to get to. But starting by understanding who I am and that I am not just one thing, one country or one type of person. I'm not just a German that, does this and that, but I have many aspects. I'm also somebody that enjoys this and I like to eat that. And all of that makes up who I am and is part of my identity.
Mhm.
And
Maybe,
acknowledging that you are like that too, right? Everybody has lots of layers.
yeah, sure. It's you can see it quicker if somebody has different countries and different languages in his
Right.
or history, but it's just the thing that can be seen from the outside, but inside, I guess everybody is different. And if it is only, and I know here in Switzerland, a friend of mine that you also knew for sure, she was born in one village, in one Christian religion, and married a guy from the next village from the other Christian religion. And at her time, it was shocking. First the religion, but then going, outside of the village
Mm-hmm.
was just like for us going to another continent.
Yeah.
you know,
But
what does
accepting
matter?
differences starts right there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, the whole theme of identity, we start with countries and cultures and languages. Those are obvious things. But if we break it down, then everybody has multiple layers there. And
Yeah.
just acknowledging that.
How are the Scottish, is it kilts?
Yes.
I saw a documentary yesterday, I guess, that there are Indian and Pakistani families who have their own pattern woven,
Mm-hmm.
because the pattern of the fabric is typical for, or is a symbol for the family.
Mm-hmm.
And now there are families from India coming and coming. They are there, and they order fabrics with their special colors. And there was this
Okay.
example where they had the color of the country, the color, one color for their religion, and then they had a white, some white in memory of his mother who had died a few
Mm-hmm.
years ago, and then some red, which was her favorite color. And so everything
Mm-hmm.
interwoven. So you have the
Yeah.
religion and the country and the mother and the color, and this stands for this family now. And
Yeah.
this is at the very end, in my opinion, how we should build our identity, or at least imagine our identity. It is so many different influences, and all of them are valid,
Mm-hmm.
and all of them, but we don't have to take into consideration any single part of it. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to pick up what you want, what you feel is somehow saying something about you or is of importance to you, and there are some parts that you just don't care, which is okay, because you are the one who defines your own identity. And this,
But that takes reflection. So I have to take a moment to think about it so that I've just for myself too. It's like I am more than just this one thing. I
Mhm.
have layers, and whether we bring different parts of ourselves into different parts of our lives. You might bring one part of yourself to work and show a different part in your private life, and show a different part to your children than to your adult friends or whatever. So you're like just showing different colors, but you're always you. And I think that is not a conflict, or not a it's fine. It's all me, and I'm being authentic, but I'm not always bringing all aspects to
Mhm.
work, because
Mhm.
otherwise I might not stay employed, because I would blow up and shout at everybody like I do at my children or whatever. We adjust, but the important thing is to acknowledge for ourselves that we have lots of different things that make up who we are, and the image of the fabric or a braid or all of those things that are interwoven is a really, really strong metaphor there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of the Scottish kilt, but it's perfect.
Sorry?
The Scottish kilts, or the tartans is what they are. The kilts are what they
Pardons,
make
yeah.
out of. The tartan is what is. It's a wonderful metaphor for that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I was younger, I once went with a friend of mine, a girl, to my home in Italy. And after 3 days staying there with me, she said, "I can't bear you. You are so different here. I have
Mm-hmm.
to go home. You're too much for me." And I didn't understand it at that time. I was thankful for her openness and honesty.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me a lot of information then later on. And now I understand it, because when I'm what I call home in Italy, I am what I feel as completely me. Where when I'm in more northern countries, I call it living with the break. So I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to be a bit softer and to adapt to the country, to the local culture. But when I'm in Italy, I just let it go, and I'm who I am, and I'm loud, and I am, and she just couldn't bear it. And it was nice in the afterward.
But I think it's adapting to the local conditions. You're still you.
Mhm.
I think if you change yourself completely and held everything back, that would be unhealthy, and that's sort of a fine line. But to adapt to what the people around you, one thing, what they expect, but also so that you can get what you want.
Mhm.
If you burst into a room, like I said, shouting at everybody like I do with my children sometimes, that wouldn't work in other environments. So
Yeah,
we adapt, even if we stay in one place, we adapt
sure.
to who and how we act and what we do. And that's a skill.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a negative thing unless we hold back a lot of ourselves all the time, and that can be detrimental to our mental health. And
Yeah.
so it's if we feel like we're always having to hide a part of ourselves, that's not what I mean. That's unhealthy.
Mm.
But sort of adapting our behavior is a skill.
Yeah, I do think so. But every now and then I have to go back. So I feel this pressure of it is a break that I'm holding, you know?
Okay.
So I have to go home, first of all, to get rid of all those mountains. So shortly before Verona, when the last mountains just are behind me, it's just like taking a deep breath and yeah, finally no mountains. And this is symbolic for me. So that's the moment
Mhm.
where I just let it go and I'm myself and I can just be me. And I don't feel it as very much hindering me while I'm here. But when I go home, then I feel the relief of letting go.
And do you ever feel like you've had enough and then you want to go back?
Yeah, every few months.
No, but when you're in Italy, do you
Oh,
get to the point where you where it gets too much and you're ready to go back?
no, no. I always have to go back. But this is, since I was brought to Germany in as a teenager,
Hmm.
and that is also a story of, I guess, every expat, more or less. You go to a different country, and
Hmm.
since then you say, I'll go back as soon as I'll go back home.
Hmm.
And I started with, I'll go back home as soon as I have finished school. I finished school. I had a relationship. So I didn't say I will go back as soon as I finish this relationship because I wasn't, of course, expecting it to be a lifelong relationship. But okay. And then, yeah, after university, and then after this work, and then I went to Frankfurt, and after that work, and then I went to Nuremberg, and I'm still, and now I'm Switzerland. So, and I'm saying as soon as I retire, I'll go back home. And I don't know if I will do that because it's a creator which is in me, but I'm not sure if I'm not anymore sure if I will do it. I don't know. But it is something that is holding myself up whenever I feel, yeah, I feel not, I don't feel at home here because I can't be fully me, because I would be too much for the culture which is here, um, which is even closer than the German one, as I felt
Hmm.
it. So when we went to Germany, they said, take care because they go into the cellar to have a laugh. And I didn't feel, of course, in comparison to Italians, they were colder.
Hmm.
But Swiss people, for my feeling, are still more close.
It's
Now
one
I
of
think
their
Germans more
big,
open.
yeah. There are cultural dimensions there that
Mhm.
yes, on average, and there are historic reasons for most of the
Yeah.
cultural dimensions too.
And
And one
maybe
of them is
geographical
geographic as
reasons.
well. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, but the thing that there's identity, and then there's also belonging, which is also a really important thing. We can only feel like we can be ourselves if we also feel like we belong, or we have people that we belong with.
Mhm.
And without that, identity doesn't work either. They kind of belong together. So belonging means that I can be fully myself. I can be who I am, which and I allow others or I make others feel comfortable being who they are completely and authentically, because
Mhm.
I am completely and authentically me.
Mhm.
Um, so there's fitting in, which is not belonging. Fitting in is changing myself to fit, to match something.
Mhm.
Um, and like teenagers, right? They will try to fit in with the group by changing, leaving really physically or mentally leaving things out. Belonging is being completely accepted for who and what I am.
Mhm.
And it's hard to find belonging. And we can find it in all kinds of places. One is in the culture or the cultural environment that we feel comfortable in, but one is, if we think of expats, finding a community of like-minded people that could be very different cultural backgrounds, because, or you have a belonging sense of belonging because you have a shared interest, whether it's music or cooking or the ages that your children are at, or you share parenting styles or education, something. There are lots of ways to find belonging.
Mhm.
And then when I find that and I feel like this is where I can let myself really be me, then
Mhm.
our identity can flourish. So they go together.
Mhm. Absolutely. So
And we need that, otherwise we cannot be well
yeah,
long term.
mental sanity is
Yeah.
strongly depending on that. Yeah, sure. So you are a mobility manager,
Hmm.
uh,
Global.
global.
Yeah, global mobility generally just means everybody moving around everywhere.
Mhm.
Whatever,
And
wherever we go.
what are you doing in that?
Well, I focus on families mostly, and if we most often on mothers, because it's the mothers that will influence the children in most cases, most because in expat families, it's still most often the father that goes to work, and the mom is the one that is often the accompanying partner who is left behind her job, her friends, her environment to make it all work. Now, that is not always the case. Sometimes the woman is the lead expat, and then it's the dad, or they're single parents, which is a whole another
Oh,
thing. I just don't know how. um, but so my focus is on moms and helping them support themselves through all the questions that we have when we do move, and then helping their children adjust to a life in a new place.
mhm.
And those are questions like we talk about identity, finding belonging, figuring out who am I here as an adult, because we often define ourselves also through our relationships and through our work.
Mhm.
And when we lose all that, when we move, who am I?
Yeah.
Right? Am I just a mom and maybe a wife?
Nice. Yeah.
But that's not what I want to be. And that's
Mhm.
part of, but that's not everything.
Mhm.
But we cut off a lot of the things that define us when we move,
Mhm.
and helping women to figure that out again so that they can be well, so that they can look after their children better, and the relationships is that's kind of where I slot in.
Mhm. So it's more a psychological support. And then are you also offering the support in building a network and finding new friends and developing the structures in the whole organization?
No, I don't. I have done that, like in an advisory role for organizations, but I prefer to work in small groups of women or families, or
Mhm.
one-to-one in a coaching or mentoring sort of situation where I help you figure out what do you want and how are you going to go find them. How are
Mhm.
you going to go, where are you, how are you going to step out the door and start to make a connection?
Mhm.
um or figure out what you want to go back to school, what is it that you want to do, and that we do in coaching slash mentoring, kind of depending on the situation.
What is the
And then we
difference?
also do, sorry.
What is the difference between coaching and mentoring?
Well, a coach asks good questions and waits for the client to provide the answers. A mentor can share her experience and advice, um, rather than just asking questions. So it's a balance. You want somebody to sort of find the answers on their own and figure it out, which is very powerful, or is it a situation where it's called for, where you just help them from you based on, I've done this, I see this in you, how could, this maybe work for you? And
Mhm.
that's more of a mentoring. A coach should never share experience like that.
Okay.
So and I like both. I think
Mhm.
coaching questions are very powerful, but sometimes it just helps to share your own experience as well.
Mhm.
So that's that. And then as a trainer, it's more of a teaching, like explaining this culture and that culture and dimensions of what, based on what I know about raising children and the influences of living abroad and how that changes them, sharing that and then helping the families figure out what they can do to support themselves specifically.
Do your clients or coaches, are they aware of this identity topic that might then concern them, at least in regard of to their children? Or is it not
Um,
relevant up to that moment?
it depends on what stage of an assignment they are at. If you're preparing to go abroad, then, or you've just arrived in a new place, it's not really something because you're so busy with logistics,
Mhm.
and just trying to feed everybody and make sure that you know how to get from A to B and all of those. But after a while, 6 months in, a year in, you kind of realize, whoa, there's something missing, and it's a big thing.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot of people don't acknowledge it because there's shame attached, because expat life is good life, right? We do well, we get paid well. This is all supposed to be great, right? It's
Shut up and
champagne
be happy.
breakfasts and,
Mhm.
but I can have the best time, best environment around me and have, feel wealthy money wise and still be extremely unhappy and lonely. And that will reflect on my children and my relationships and myself. The incidence of mental health issues in expats is considerably higher than the general population in any country.
Okay, sure. Life is much harder.
And it's not talked about because, expat life is glamorous.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay.
And there are aspects of it that's true,
Mhm.
but that's not the whole picture.
As always.
There are lots of layers.
Yeah, lots of layers. Again, a tartan.
Yes.
From my side, you have answered all my questions. Is there something you would like to add for the few people
No,
who are looking at
I've
my...
got my thinking about the tapestry no more and how I'll use that metaphor. I think it's wonderful to get the word out, that people to know and acknowledge that there's a lot more to who I am, who you are, than your passport. And it's a great conversation that we started, and I think there'll be more to say.
Great. So thank you very much, Anna. We will have all the links in the information section below, so people can
Yeah,
get in contact with you as soon as they want.
great.
Thank you again and have a great day.
Thank you. Take
Bye.
care.
I hope you enjoyed this little chat of ours and got much more information from Anna than we had before. She has a very interesting life and an interesting business, and is coaching and helping so many women, mostly moms. So thank you again, Anna. See you next time. Be kind.